know that we have a lot of phone calls in the wings at the bottom of the hour. I promise that we'll get to your phone calls. Dr. Stan Monteith, for decade upon decade upon decade, has been exposing how they've engineered the AIDS virus, how they carry out chemical biological attacks. He is a medical doctor, MD, also a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, and he's written quite a few books, The Brotherhood of Darkness. He has all the source documents. He's very neurotic, and that's good, about having all his documentation in a row. And I wanted to have him on about the global population reduction agenda, go over some of the facts, how they're doing it, what the mercury in the vaccines, what the rest of the cancer viruses found in hundreds of vaccines are doing, why we've gone from 1 in 33 with cancer to 1 in 3, why all this is happening, and what the globalist master plan says. Remember, the official United Nations Biological Diversity Assessments that are in my film, Road to Tyranny, that you can get at any library, say they plan to reinstitute human sacrifice at giant temples to reduce our numbers. Now, look, I can't make this up. That sounds insane. Believe me, when I first heard about it 10 years ago and went and looked it up at UT and got the UN reports and then videotaped it to put it in the film, I couldn't believe it. They are out of their minds, lunatics. But Caligula married his horse. Nero would go in and murder people dressed up like a werewolf at their dinner parties. Children chained down. These are mainline histories. Look at what Hitler did. They always go crazy. Kim Jong-il has a 7-story pleasure palace and has Asian starlets kidnapped that he rapes and kills. I mean, I'm sorry that they're saying and doing this, but I know it sounds insane. But they say they're going to reinstitute human sacrifice to control population, as they did in Aztec temples. And now they've built one. Tex Mars covers that in his new book. I mean, this is Looney Tune land. I'm not saying that any of this is even real. The point is they believe it. They believe that they are manifesting it. Let's go to Dr. Stan Monteith, Radio Liberty, syndicated radio talk show host. I now own more than 50 affiliates across the land last time I checked. Dr. Monteith, thank you in your busy schedule doing 5 hours of radio a day for joining us, sir.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Alex.
Doctor, I'm going to try my best. You know, I'm the king of interrupting because so much goes through my mind, and I burn with a passion to inform people. Walk through the history of population reduction, what we're facing, and what the master plan is, and then the Luciferian religion that drives it.
Well, basically, of course, these ideas really begin back with Malthus, who was a Anglican minister, if you can believe it, but he was writing a series of essays on population control in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and he even talked about, how we just couldn't let new children be born unless somebody had died off, and he talked about, if we didn't bring things under control, we were going to have to begin building our cities next to stagnant ponds and discourage cleanliness and certainly oppose anybody who wanted to stop the spread of disease. Now, we refer to these concepts as Malthusian. Of course, they were picked up by a fellow named Galton, who followed him, was related to Darwin, and then, of course, really came to America with Margaret Sanger in the early 1900s, all financed by the Rockefellers. Margaret Sanger really believed in population control, but she believed in eugenics. That was what it was really about, breeding the perfect people and doing away with the unworthy, the human weeds, as referred to. But what most people don't understand is that the ideas that Adolf Hitler brought in Germany but actually came from the United States. We actually had forced sterilization. They sterilized tens of thousands of people in the United States in the early 1920s, and of course, after the debacle of the Second World War, with the horror of the Holocaust, and if you understand that from the Nazi point of view, that this was simply applied science. They were doing away with the unworthy people, the Jews, the gypsies, the mentally defective, those with physical handicaps, those who were genetically defective. They were purifying the gene pool. That's what it was about. Well, of course, eugenics got a bad name after the Second World War, and after, of course, that the people in the United States were totally in favor of this. They couldn't let the American people know that anymore. They could let them know that it was American corporations, GM, Ford, International Telephone and Telegraph, that were actually, during the Second World War, were actually, of course, preparing the weapons of war, the tanks, the dive bombers, the trucks, the military equipment that Adolf Hitler used. It was all financed largely from here in the United States, creating the best enemy money could buy. And then, of course, at the end of the Second World War, why many of the scientists, the Nazi scientists, who were involved with, of course, creating new diseases, who were involved with mind control, and, of course, with the space program, were brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip. And, of course, we have a 4-tape set on that. You can check that out on the Internet. A wonderful book by Linda Hunt called The Secret Agenda on Operation Paperclip. And then, of course, we helped 10,000 of the most vicious of the Nazi criminals escape to South America. The CIA, MI6, and a cell within the Vatican helped 10,000 Nazis escape to South America. Martin Bormann, Sidney, Dr. Mengele, Klaus Barbie, Adolf Eichmann. The Jews tracked down a couple of them, Eichmann and Barbie, but of course the CIA protected the rest of them. People find it difficult to believe, and yet these were the people who carried out the Holocaust because they had friends in the United States.
Now, Doctor, I want to just add, eugenics with sterilization, 500,000 plus, continued until 1987 publicly through health departments, and the blood taking and birth of babies, all of that is about the eugenics program. And also public eugenics was about purifying the elite, exterminating the subhumans. But the real eugenics at the higher level, as they wrote, and as my film Endgame covers, and as you know, is really about dumbing us down and having a servant class for the elite, is it not?
Well, those who are allowed to live, but they intend to kill off most of the people in the world. Now, certainly anybody who questions that is only to read the writings of Jacques Cousteau, and we actually provide this to our ministry in an article that is published in the UNESCO Courier in November of 1991. Why Jacques Cousteau, who everybody knows, oh my goodness, he invented the scuba gear and he swam with the dolphins. Jacques Cousteau discussed the need to bring the world back into balance and said, you know, it's a terrible thing. We're going to have to eliminate 350,000 people a day. 350,000 people a day is a terrible thing to say, but even worse not to say it. And of course, you read the writings of Bertrand Russell in his book, The Impact of Science on Society, where he talks about, we really don't kill off enough with abortion and with war. What we need is a black plague to sweep the world once in every generation.
And of course, now Jacques Cousteau's son has all these TV shows, and it's always humans are bad. All these nature shows, humans are bad. And Dr. Pianka gives speeches saying kill 90% of us, and he gets a standing ovation. They are the majority. They're in place now.
Well, they're in positions of power. And as incredible as it may seem, they're actually carrying out these programs on the American people today. I got involved in this with the AIDS epidemic, and it didn't make any sense if we weren't doing the logical things to try to stop this epidemic. Basically, you stop a sexually transmitted disease by identifying who has it, find out who they got it from and who they spread it to, and, force these people to stop spreading a deadly disease. Every effort was made to stop trying to identify the people who were infected, or we couldn't do routine testing. Oh, my goodness, we'd drive the disease underground. Nobody would go to the doctor if they knew they're going to be tested for AIDS. We couldn't do premarital testing. This is a sexually transmitted disease. What's wrong with premarital testing? Oh, my goodness, people wouldn't go to the doctor if they were going to be tested. We do not do prenatal testing, pregnant women, to prevent the mother who has the disease from spreading it to her unborn child, and it's preventable. We do not do neonatal testing. We do not do hardly any of the things. There are a few states where they do neonatal testing. Finally, after about 15 years, the Centers for Disease Control did come out and say, well, maybe we ought to do routine testing. But, of course, we block this in other countries. In Africa today, this is being used for population control. If you go into Botswana, and we have the reports, anybody who wants to verify them, we'll be glad to provide them. In Botswana, where the U.S. Commerce Department is monitoring the AIDS epidemic. Why are we spending money to monitor the AIDS epidemic in Botswana? Why? Because we want to see what a great job we're doing. And 46% of the pregnant women there, and they test every pregnant woman for HIV disease, 46% are infected, and they're all going to die. And this disease is simply wiping out the populations of many African countries. And I mean, the average age, for instance, in a place like Zimbabwe has dropped from about 64 down to about 38, and probably falling more rapidly.
Doctor, as you know, even the BBC's had to admit it, that they find young girls who've never been sexually active, virgins, and their family doesn't even have HIV, and then they say they must have got it from dirty needles when they were vaccinated. But then we found all sorts of sterilization compounds and other carrier viruses and things in shots, and we have all these Nobel Prize winners coming out saying HIV and AIDS is engineered.